I don't usually talk about active cases. This one isn't active anymore. That's the only reason I can say any of this. Most cases end when you write the report. This one didn't, not in any way that mattered. We got the call just after midnight. By the time we spoke to Lena Voss, I had been awake long enough for every room to feel the same. Fluorescent light, bad coffee, paper, dust. 3 dead people in 1 week should have felt sharp, but exhaustion flattens everything. Lena's shop sat in a dying strip mall. Half her sign was out. She looked less like a psychic than a tired business owner. She was angry that we were there, angry that the dead had all visited her shop. She told us most people came in wanting comfort. One man had not. He only wanted to know whether the bad part had already started. His name was Owen Mercer. We found him in a narrow apartment over a pharmacy. He worked in risk analysis for an insurance company. That fit him. He had the look of a man who spent his days turning disaster into percentages and had started believing numbers were kinder than people. My partner asked most of the questions. I watched Owen instead. He admitted he had seen 2 of the victims at Lena's shop. Then he told us there would be another one. A man in his 50s, buried shallow off a service road near a broken fence line and scrub pine. Mud in the sleeve. Watch still running if it had not been taken. I asked how he knew that. He said, "I don't know things. I just know where they end." We found the body the next morning where he said it would be. The watch was still running. After that, Owen stopped being an odd witness and became a problem. If he was involved, he was close to the killer. If he was not involved, he might be next. My partner stayed with the case, and I got the simple job. Keep him alive for 1 night. We put him in a motel near the highway because it was fast and anonymous. The kind with doors facing an exterior walkway, a glowing vacancy sign, thin curtains, and an ice machine at the far end of the 2nd floor. The room was painfully ordinary. 2 beds, a small table, a bathroom with yellow tile, a rattling vent. I checked the window, the bathroom, the painted shut connecting door, and told myself the rest would be easy. Owen stood by the dresser and looked at the curtain. "Don't stand in front of the window once it gets dark," he said. I asked why. He said, "Because that is where people stand when they want to feel visible to themselves." I pulled the curtain back a little and looked out. Weak red light from the sign washed over the railings. For a second, I thought I saw someone standing near the ice machine, not moving, just there. Then the light flickered and the shape was gone. Reflection, I told myself. Fatigue, suggestion. Owen had not moved. He usually waits until you start feeling embarrassed for noticing him, he said. I did not like the word usually. My partner called around 9. They had a possible name tied to more than one victim, a maintenance worker and part-time motel porter named Grant Heller. He knew buildings, cameras, blind spots, and how to work nights without being remembered. She told me to keep the door locked and wait for backup. For the first hour, nothing happened. The television whispered on mute. Cars passed on the highway in long, soft waves. The air unit clicked on and off. Somewhere outside, the ice machine dropped cubes at irregular intervals. Then it stopped. The silence that followed felt larger than it should have, because I had already gotten used to the noise. The phone rang once. I picked it up. No voice. Then a click. I checked the peephole. Nobody there. When I sat back down, Owen said, "The elevator will open on this floor in a minute, and nobody will get out." 30 seconds later, I heard the cables. The doors opened at the far end. I waited for footsteps. None came. I asked whether he was trying to frighten me. "No," he said. "If I were trying to frighten you, I would tell you what I think is in the space above the bathroom." I checked anyway. Tile floor, damp sink, shower curtain, a square ceiling panel above the shower. Nothing else. When I came back out, the paper cup I had left on the table was closer to the lamp. It might have been me, probably was me, but I had no memory of moving it. By 10:30, the hallway light outside our room had started to fail. It buzzed, brightened, dimmed, and came back weaker each time. Owen was too calm for an innocent man and too tired for a performer. My partner called again. A former coworker said Heller liked service corridors, attics, crawl spaces, places that let him move through buildings without being seen. She told me not to leave the room for any reason. 10 minutes later, I stepped into the hallway. Doing nothing had become harder than checking. The walkway was wet from light rain. Halfway down the rail, a housekeeping cart sat alone with folded towels on top. I had not seen it there before. No figure, no movement, just motel silence. I walked to the stairwell, looked over the rail at the parking lot, and saw only my car and 2 pickups with rain on the windshields. When I turned back, I had the sudden feeling that our door looked slightly more open than I remembered. It was still locked when I touched it. Inside, the room felt colder. Owen did not look up when I came in. "You should not let him choose when you look away," he said. Near midnight, the vent in the bathroom rattled, then stopped. The room had lost too many of its ordinary sounds. The chain lock gave a tiny metallic tap. Not a hard test, just contact. I was up immediately, staring through the peephole. The walkway was empty. At the far end, the elevator doors slid open. Nobody got out. They stayed open for 3 full seconds, then closed. When I turned back, Owen was looking at the bathroom. "He is closer now," he said. That was the moment I understood the thing outside the room was not outside in any useful sense. It was using the building itself. Walkways, service spaces, maintenance gaps. Heller did not need to rush us. He only needed us to accept the room as ours. I called my partner and told her to send everyone she had. While I was on the phone, I heard a soft sound from inside the room. A small rubber wheel turning half an inch, then settling. I looked toward the bathroom alcove. At first, I thought it was laundry. Then my eyes adjusted and I realized a housekeeping cart had been rolled partly into the room. My jacket was gone from the chair. I saw it folded on the cart beneath the towels, along with Owen's wallet, his room key, my paper cup, and the motel Bible from the drawer. All of it arranged carefully. The bathroom floor was wet. A line of fresh footprints crossed the tile and came out toward the beds. They led in. There were no prints leading back out. I moved toward the bathroom slowly and looked up. The ceiling panel above the shower had been pushed aside. Dark space above it. Pipes. Dust. Enough room for a man to crouch. That was the worst part. Realizing he had been close enough to hear us breathe, close enough to hear my partner's voice on the phone, close enough to know when I looked through the peephole and when I stopped. Owen spoke behind me in a voice so calm it felt obscene. He likes places where people get tired enough to stop scanning corners. Then red and blue lights swept across the curtain, tires in the lot, doors slamming below. Officers ran the walkway, searched the stairwells, the roof access, the laundry room, the maintenance closet. They found the service path above our bathroom and wet dust where someone had crawled. They did not find Grant Heller. By 3 in the morning, the motel looked like every crime scene after fear has been turned into procedure. Owen was taken out alive. He looked more ashamed than relieved. At the time, I read that as shock. Later, I was not so sure. He had spent the whole night with the tired patience of a man waiting for something he already recognized. The next afternoon, he was found dead in his apartment. Officially, it was suicide. No forced entry, no note. Pills, liquor, a body on the floor beside the bed. My partner thought Owen had finally run out of distance between himself and whatever he had been seeing. I was less certain. The more I replayed that night, the less it felt like I had been protecting a man who believed he could be saved in the ordinary sense. He had warned us about details before they happened, but there had been no urgency in him by the end, only exhaustion. As if knowing was not the same as escaping. As if he had been living with outcomes long enough to stop arguing with them. The thing that stayed with me was small enough that nobody else found it convincing. During evidence review, a technician logged a motel key sleeve on Owen's kitchen table. The sleeve from our room. Same room number in blue ink. It should have been in police custody from the night before. I still stay in motels sometimes. The rooms are always the same in the ways that matter. Curtains that never fully close. A bathroom vent that sounds too loud until it suddenly does not. Ice machines at the end of long walkways. What I remember most is not Owen's fear, but the absence of it at the end. The way some people look when they stop mistaking recognition for hope. A week after Owen died, I was alone in a room outside Richmond, going over notes at the table between the beds. Nothing unusual. Highway noise, air unit, television on mute. The steady, hollow drop of ice at the far end of the second floor. Then the ice machine stopped. I sat very still and listened, because I know now that the worst part is not seeing someone in the dark. It is realizing the room has been listening with you. I don't usually talk about closed cases. Most of them flatten out once the report is written, once the evidence is boxed, once the names are passed on to other departments and other people. This one never did. We got the first call a little after 1 in the morning, and by the third murder I had been awake long enough for every room to feel the same. Fluorescent light, bad coffee, paper, dust. The victim that night was found sitting upright in his own living room, hands folded in his lap, shoes lined neatly beside the chair. A lamp had been turned on near him. The television was off. Family photos on the shelf had been turned face down. The remote had been centered with the edge of the table, and the lamp cord pulled straight. Nothing expensive was missing. No sign of rage, no broken furniture, no panic in the room at all. My partner stood beside me and said it felt less like a homicide scene than a room someone had corrected. That became the shape of the case. Each victim lived alone. Each home was ordinary. Small apartments, quiet houses, places with routines worn into them by repetition. And after each murder, something private had been touched in a way that felt intimate and wrong. A cup of tea had been poured out and rinsed clean. Reading glasses had been folded and set beside a closed book in a room where the victim had never made it that night. In one home, the chairs had been pushed in to the same depth beneath the table. It started to bother me more than the bodies did. The killer was not taking jewelry, cash, or electronics. He was editing the last shape of each life. I remember standing in one kitchen at 4 in the morning, looking at a dish towel folded too carefully over the sink, and thinking that whoever had done this had stayed longer than he needed to. He had not killed for anger. He collected people like objects. We got our suspect through the kind of detail that usually feels too small to matter. His name appeared in building records near 2 victims, then a third. He did part-time maintenance work, deliveries, wellness checks for a private service company, the kind of quiet jobs that let a man enter homes without being remembered for long. When we met him, he did not look like the center of anything. He was polite, soft-spoken, and plain in a way that almost erased him. Mid-30s maybe, clean clothes, steady voice, a face you could lose 10 minutes after seeing it. He offered us coffee. He answered questions without rushing. He never once asked which victim we meant, only whether we had the right address for the building. On his counter, 2 mugs sat side by side with their handles turned to the same angle. My partner thought he was strange but usable, someone worth watching. I told myself my unease was fatigue. Still, while he spoke, the apartment around us felt wrong. Not dramatic, just airless. Even the hallway noise outside seemed to thin out while we were there. When we left, I realized I had been listening for some mistake in his voice and had heard none. We kept digging, and the case got quieter instead of louder. The more we learned about him, the less emotional sense he made. No violent outbursts in his history, no obvious obsession with one type of victim, no speeches, no letters, no need to be seen, just access. He drifted through lives by being useful. He fixed locks, checked smoke alarms, carried boxes, replaced filters. Then small things started happening around us. A file on my desk that I was sure I had left crooked was sitting square with the edge. My passenger seat was pushed back an inch farther than I kept it. A pen on my desk was placed exactly parallel to a legal pad. None of that was proof. It was barely worth mentioning. But the same feeling from the murder scene started following me. Not theft, not damage, adjustment. My partner laughed off the pen, then stopped laughing when someone called her apartment late at night and said nothing at all. She listened for almost 10 seconds before the line went dead. The next morning, she noticed the rug by her door had been straightened. She was certain she had left one corner turned over. That was when I started to believe he was no longer simply ahead of us. He was getting familiar with her. We found evidence that one of the victims had spoken to him weeks before anyone else knew their paths had crossed. That shifted something in both of us. My partner stopped going home at the same hour every night. I started checking the back seat of my car without thinking. We saw him twice in places where he could still claim coincidence. Once sitting alone in a hospital waiting room while we interviewed a witness upstairs. Once at the far end of a supermarket aisle near midnight, standing still with one hand on a cart he never moved. The 3 items in it were laid in a straight line, labels facing up. He looked at me once, not startled, not guilty, then turned the cart and disappeared behind stacked cases of bottled water. No chase, no scene, just silent proximity. Around the same time, the physical world started feeling thinner. Elevator doors opening onto an empty floor and waiting too long before closing. A stairwell light buzzing once, then going silent over my head. I kept telling myself there were explanations. There usually are. That is one of the things police work does to you. It teaches you to distrust atmosphere. But atmosphere was the whole case. I told my partner not to stay alone at her apartment until we had enough for an arrest. She told me I was becoming superstitious, then handed me a spare key and asked if I wanted coffee. It was late when I got there. Her place looked exactly like it always did. Small kitchen, lamp near the couch, coat over the back of a chair, stack of files on the table. We sat with our phones close and waited for a call from the judge on the warrant. Outside, rain tapped the glass in short, soft bursts. Inside, the dishwasher ticked through a drying cycle. We talked about the case in low voices until even that felt too loud. Then the kitchen sounds stopped. Not all at once. First the dishwasher, then the refrigerator hum. Then the air from the vent above the bathroom door seemed to thin out until the whole apartment felt like it was holding its breath. My partner noticed it too. She looked toward the hall and asked if I had moved her coffee mug. I had not. It was upside down on the drying mat, clean, though she had left it on the table half an hour earlier. After that, the room started revealing itself in pieces. A framed photo on the shelf had been turned slightly inward. Her shoes by the bedroom door were aligned more neatly than she ever kept them. A dish towel hung folded over the sink in thirds, not the way either of us had used it. None of it looked violent. That was the problem. It looked considerate, curated. I moved through the apartment slowly, checking doors, windows, the narrow hall closet. My partner stayed near the kitchen, one hand already on her phone. Then I saw the bathroom light reflecting off the tile and noticed two dark marks on the floor just beyond the sink. Damp footprints, barely visible, leading inward from the hall, none leading back. I looked up and saw that the vent cover above the shower sat crooked by less than an inch. I dragged a chair under it and touched the metal edge. It shifted too easily. Something moved once above me, so slight I felt it through the frame before I really heard it. My partner looked up at the same moment. For 1 second, I had the sick certainty that if I raised my face to that opening, someone else's would be waiting inches away. He had been inside her apartment, maybe minutes earlier, maybe longer, close enough to hear us speak, close enough to know where she kept her shoes, how she left her mug, how she folded nothing because she rarely folded anything. I called it in and told her to get out to the hallway. She had just taken 2 steps when we heard a soft sound from behind the bathroom wall. Not a bang, not a run, only the dull scrape of something brushing through a narrow service space. Then came one light tap from the vent above the shower, so careful it sounded almost deliberate. We backed into the hall and waited with the apartment door open behind us. That was the longest minute of the case. Neighbors still asleep. Rain moving down the stair rail. The yellow hall light flickering once and settling. No one rushing out. No one forcing a confrontation. When backup arrived, they opened the maintenance access at the far end of the floor and found him crouched behind ductwork with a small canvas bag beside him. Inside were keys, folded photographs, a pair of reading glasses, a watch, and small personal things from the dead. He came out quietly. No struggle, no explanation. He only looked past us once toward my partner's open door, as if he were irritated to have been stopped before finishing some careful task. We thought he was human. That was the first mistake. Not because he was something supernatural, because we kept expecting normal human motives, and there were none that fit. The arrest closed the case, for everyone except us. The evidence was solid. He had access records, victim property, fibers, timing, enough to bury him in court. But when they questioned him, he talked less about killing than about rooms. Which chair someone always used, which lamp they preferred at night, where they dropped their keys, which mug belonged to weekdays and which one belonged to weekends. He spoke as if the murders mattered less than the private habits left behind. My partner said some people have a darkness in them that does not point anywhere higher than appetite. Maybe she was right. I still think about how calm he was. Not proud, not ashamed, only empty in a way I had not known a person could be. After the sentencing, I went back to work. The city kept moving. Reports kept stacking up. But I noticed I had started checking the arrangement of ordinary things without meaning to. A chair angle, a towel over the sink, a cup on a counter. A few weeks later, I was home alone, standing in my kitchen after midnight, too tired to sleep and too awake to sit still. The refrigerator hummed. Rain tapped the window. My keys were on the counter where I always left them. My coat hung over the chair near the table. I poured water, turned off the light above the stove, and then stopped. The chair by the table was pushed in farther than I remembered. Maybe I had done it. Maybe I had not. That is the part that stayed with me. Not proof, not certainty. Just the knowledge that someone can move through a life so quietly that doubt does half the work for them. I stood there for a long time, looking at that chair, and understood that the worst thing we had caught was not a monster. It was a man, and that was enough. I got to the town just before dark, after 4 hours on a road that seemed to go nowhere on purpose. It was a missing person case, simple on paper. One man last seen at a roadside motel, car still in the lot, wallet gone, phone dead. Cases like that usually turn into one of three things: a drunk who wanders off, a man who wants to disappear, or a body found later in a place nobody thought to check. I wanted one of those answers. I was tired, annoyed at the drive, annoyed that I had given up another weekend to work. The town should have calmed me down. It was small, quiet, and neat. One main road, one gas station, one diner, a sheriff office, a church, and the motel on the edge of town with a low vacancy sign glowing red in the dust. The clerk greeted me like he had been expecting me. He handed me a key, said he remembered the missing man vaguely, and then gave me the same line I would hear for the next 2 days. He was just passing through. He probably kept going. The sheriff was polite. The waitress was polite. The mechanic was polite. That was the first thing that got under my skin. Nobody resisted me. They all answered every question I asked, just never in a way that left anything solid in my hands. The sheriff said the missing man had seemed normal. The waitress said he had eaten quietly and left cash on the table. The mechanic said he might have asked for directions. The details shifted, but the shape stayed the same. He was passing through. He must have kept going. It sounded less like gossip than a phrase people had worn smooth by repeating it. I checked the missing man's car. No phone, no note, no sign of a fight. Just a jacket on the back seat and a road atlas folded open to a page that ended at this town. That night I sat in my motel room with my coat over the second chair, my notebook on the table, and the curtain cracked 1 inch so I could see the parking lot. I told myself I only needed one inconsistency. The first thing that felt wrong enough to remember was the room next to mine. The clerk said it was empty, but twice that first night I saw a line of weak light under the door. I mentioned it the next morning, and he smiled as if I had pointed out old wiring. Then came other small things. A housekeeping card on the walkway that seemed to stay in the same place no matter when I looked. The ice machine at the far end of the building running in a steady rhythm until it stopped all at once and made the silence feel too large. The vent in my room humming, then cutting out for a few seconds before coming back thinner. Once I came back from the sheriff office and found the curtain fully closed, though I knew I had left it cracked. Another time, the motel Bible sat more neatly centered on the table than I remembered. None of it was proof. So I kept leaning on logic. Small town, old building, bad memory, too little sleep. Then I called the missing man's sister. She told me he had not been depressed, had not been drinking, and had called that morning to say he would be home by dinner. After that, simple stopped being a useful word. The longer I stayed, the more the town seemed to answer me as one body. I would walk into the diner and the voices would lower at once, not into silence exactly, just into a flatter sound, as if everyone had remembered the same rule at the same time. I heard the same phrase in different places. Some things need tending. The waitress said it about flowers outside the church. The sheriff said it about old roads after rain. The motel clerk said it when I asked why the rooms on the north side were kept ready even when nobody was staying in them. Everyone knew. No one said it. The motel started feeling less like a place I was staying and more like a place I was being kept in. I would wake to footsteps on the upper walkway, slow and measured, stopping right outside my door without a knock. When I checked, nobody would be there. The hall light outside my room flickered one night and then stayed dimmer than before. One morning I found the chair from beneath the door handle, a chair I did not remember placing there, pushed neatly back under the desk. Whatever was wrong here preferred patience. I found the next real lead in a shut-down clinic annex behind the church, a place the sheriff described as storage for community supplies. It was exactly as dull as he wanted it to sound. Shelves, mops, folded linens, boxes of gloves, a concrete floor that held cold long after the day had warmed up. But the details did not belong together. Cleaning fluid restocked too often for a room nobody used. Nutritional drinks, medical tape, humidifier parts, an oxygen mask in a drawer beside church fundraiser forms, fresh labels in different handwriting on boxes that should have been old and dusty. Someone had been tending to something for a long time and not alone. They weren't hiding it. They were maintaining it. I went back to the motel with that thought settled in me like bad food. That evening, I saw the sheriff's deputy carrying folded sheets through a side door near the laundry room. Later, a woman from the diner loaded empty supply boxes into her trunk behind the motel. Nobody hurried. Nobody looked guilty. Their movements were ordinary, like people taking turns at a task too familiar to think about. I stopped sleeping properly after that. I would wake at 3 in the morning and lie still, listening to the ice machine restart, to plumbing knocking in the walls, to a cough from the next room that sounded wet and then quickly buried. The room next to mine had been marked vacant on the ledger. The room was not empty, it was being used. On the third night, I came back from tracing a narrow service corridor behind the motel office and knew something had shifted before I even put my key in the door. The building sounded wrong. No ice machine, no air unit, no television from any room. Even the parking lot looked paused. Inside my room, small things had been corrected. My shoes were aligned near the bed. My notebook was closed. The map I had left open was placed in the center of the table. I stood there without moving and heard it through the wall at my left. Breathing. Thin, uneven, strained. Then nothing. I put my ear to the wall and heard the bed frame shift once. I went out to the walkway and saw nobody. When I came back in, the sound had stopped again. There was a narrow maintenance panel behind the bathroom door in my room, painted over enough times to look sealed. It was not sealed. When I worked it loose, I found a service gap wide enough to move sideways through if I turned my shoulders. The air in there was damp and a little warmer than it should have been. I took 2 steps and reached the access point into the next room. What I saw first was not a person. It was a room stripped of anything casual. Curtains pinned shut. A tray with 2 cups of water, one fresh and one half empty. A washcloth in the sink. Medical tape, pill bottles with labels torn off. A portable oxygen unit humming so softly I had missed it through the wall. Then I saw the bed. Something was in it, not fully still, not fully awake. A shape under a blanket, too thin through the shoulders, one arm resting outside the sheet with the hand turned palm down as if it had fallen there and stayed. The chest moved once, barely. Then again, with a shallow pulling sound that caught halfway and finished on a rattle. That was enough. Whatever was there was real, alive in the strictest sense, kept alive. I saw shoes lined along the wall, different sizes, and a notebook on the table with times and initials written in more than one hand. Then I became aware of someone behind me, not touching me, just close enough that I could hear quiet breathing at my shoulder. When I turned, a woman I had seen at the diner stood in the service gap with her hands at her sides, expression tired, not frightened, not angry. Past her, through the crack of the door to my room, I could see shapes on the walkway outside, townspeople standing in stillness under the dim light, already gathered. Nobody rushed me. Nobody shouted. That made it worse. The woman in the service gap stepped back half an inch to give me room, as if I were the one making things difficult. I took out my phone and called the state number I had already left a message with earlier that day, then called again until I got a live voice. I kept my eyes on the room while I spoke. The thing on the bed moved once more, enough to pull the blanket at the shoulder. I could not tell if it was the missing man, or someone older, or someone who had been there so long the question no longer mattered. I saw a wallet on the table, then a watch, then a driver's license turned face down beneath a cup. The people outside waited. The sheriff came onto the walkway and stood with the others, one hand on the rail. He looked less like a man caught than a man interrupted. By the time state police arrived, nobody had moved very much. The oxygen unit kept humming. The breathing on the bed kept catching and starting again. The town gave up the room the way tired people give up an argument they no longer believe they should have to explain. What followed looked clear on paper and stayed unclear everywhere else. The missing man's things were found in the motel. Records had been altered. Supplies had been shared between the annex and the motel for years. Several people were charged. The sheriff called it care. Another man called it duty. A church elder used the word mercy. None of them agreed enough to make a clean story, but all of them agreed on one thing without saying it directly. Whatever was in that room had to be kept going, and other people had paid for that need. Whether they believed that in a religious way, a sick way, or just because nobody there remembered how to stop, I never learned. Medical reports described neglect, sedation, prolonged concealment, and a patient in severe decline. That language was accurate and still felt too small. I left town after the last interview and drove until the road widened and the gas stations got brighter. I kept expecting relief. What I got instead was the feeling that I had not uncovered a secret so much as stepped into a routine that had been running without me. A week later, I stopped at another motel off another highway and lay awake listening to the wall beside my bed. Just an ordinary building. Old pipes, weak air conditioner, somebody in the next room coughing once and rolling over. Nothing else. Still, I could not sleep. I kept hearing the silence from that town, the way sounds stopped there before anything important happened. I got up, checked the lock, checked the curtain, checked the chair by the table. Everything was where it should be. I turned out the lamp and stood in the dark a little longer than I needed to. Some cases end when the report is filed. This one did not. I still do not know what those people believed they were serving. I only know that they served it together, quietly, for a long time. And I know that once you have seen a whole town organize itself around something nobody will name, ordinary sounds do not stay ordinary. A cough through a motel wall, a vent stopping in the night, a room next door that should be empty but isn't.